Princess Xyrella of House Vera stood before the viewing canopy of the Starlight Throne, the flagship of the Eltran Imperial Fleet. From here, the stars themselves bowed, or so her tutors had once told her. The Eltran Empire stretched across 500 systems, their luminous banners planted on worlds from the frozen moons of Althais to the burning clouds of Turan. They were an ancient race, born from the fusion of starlight and stone, their crystalline forms a testament to evolution among the cosmos. And yet, today, the future of that empire depended on a single, fragile being from a small blue planet on the edge of the Orion Spur. "Do you still resent the Union, Highness?" asked Soren, her aide and most trusted friend, as he adjusted the delicate silver mantle draped over her shoulders. His voice hummed like polished glass, the mark of a noble-born Eltran. Xyrella didn't answer immediately. Her emerald eyes, faceted like gemstones, remained fixed on the shipyard below, where a human shuttle was approaching under heavy escort. "It's not resentment," she said at last. "It's curiosity. How can a people so young and so backward possibly help us?" Soren's mandibles clicked softly, a gesture of amusement. "The Council believes their resourcefulness is worth the risk, and Earth's location gives us strategic depth against the Dominion." Still, he tilted his head. "It is an odd choice. A princess of the oldest blood, wed to a mammal." Xyrella let out a breath, a sound like a chime. "This is diplomacy, not romance. A marriage forged in treaties, not temples." Yet as she said it, she felt the smallest pang of something she hadn't admitted to anyone: fear. The first time she saw Daniel Carter, she almost laughed. He was waiting for her in the reception hall, surrounded by towering Eltran dignitaries, whose crystalline frames refracted the light into rainbows. In contrast, he looked plain. His frame was lean, his skin soft and dull by Eltran standards, where her people stood nearly 7 feet tall and moved with gliding grace. He was shorter, grounded, almost clumsy, and yet he smiled with unshakable calm as she approached, as if this were not the most momentous political ceremony in centuries. "Princess Xyrella," he said, bowing low in the human fashion. "It's an honor." His voice was steady, pleasant, nothing remarkable. But his eyes were another matter. They were brown, simple, unadorned, and yet there was a focus in them, a depth she could not name. "Ambassador Carter," she replied, inclining her head with the regal composure drilled into her since birth. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "It was," he said, smiling faintly. "Though your starships make ours feel like rowboats, it is only natural." She said without thinking, "Your civilization is still in its infancy." If he took offense, he didn't show it. "Then perhaps you'll forgive us for crawling before we can fly." Something in the way he said it, not defensive, not resentful, just factual, unsettled her. The wedding took place in the Hall of Starlight, under the gaze of 10,000 witnesses and countless more across the empire. The rites were elaborate and ancient, twin crystals forged together in plasma fire, oaths spoken in both Eltran resonance and crude human syllables. Xyrella wore the ceremonial armor of her house, lattice work, spun from living diamond, while Daniel wore what humans called a tuxedo. It was absurdly simple by Eltran standards, yet he wore it with a quiet dignity that drew whispers among the courtiers. When the ceremony was over and the treaties signed, they were declared bonded, partners not just in name, but as a living symbol of peace between their peoples. "Do you regret this?" she asked him that night when they were alone for the first time in their shared chambers. "Not at all," he said without hesitation. "Do you?" Xyrella considered lying, but something about his steady gaze disarmed her. "I don't know yet, that's fair." He walked to the observation window, staring out at the glittering swirl of the nebula beyond. "I imagine it's strange for you, marrying someone you barely know, someone from a race that hasn't even left its own star system until recently." "You imagine correctly," she said, a hint of amusement slipping into her voice. "You are curious to me." "Curious is a good start," he said. Better than contempt. Days turned into weeks. Against her expectations, life with Daniel was pleasant. He was attentive without being overbearing, considerate in ways she had never experienced from suitors of her own kind. When she spoke of her childhood among the floating gardens of Vera Prime, he listened with rapt attention. When she showed him the harmonic sculptures her people used for meditation, he asked questions, good questions, thoughtful ones. Once, he prepared a drink for her, carefully researching the molecular composition of Eltaran digestive systems to craft something safe and palatable. It's called tea, he explained with an embarrassed grin. Humans drink it when we want to feel comfortable. She found the gesture strangely touching. In public, he played the role expected of him, charming, diplomatic, harmless. The Eltaran press adored him. The council called him a perfect symbol of unity, and Xyrella began, against all logic, to look forward to their conversations, their walks through the Citadel's gardens. The way he could make her laugh, a rare and precious thing. She still thought of him as fragile, harmless, but that belief began to crack one night. Beneath the silent canopy of the stars, she found him alone on the observation deck, a cup of tea cooling beside him. The nebula's light bathed his face in violet and silver, but his expression was darker, sharp, unreadable. "Daniel," she said softly, "you're awake late." He glanced back and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Couldn't sleep? Something troubles you?" "Just thinking." He turned back to the stars. "About home, about how much can change in so little time." Xyrella stepped closer, intrigued. "You speak as though something is about to change." "Everything always changes," he murmured. "The question is whether we notice before it's too late." She tilted her head. "Humans speak in riddles." "Maybe." He looked at her then, really looked, with that deep, steady gaze that made her pulse quicken. "But sometimes riddles hide truths people aren't ready to face." "And what truth is that?" He smiled again, that same faint, almost wistful smile. "That people are never as harmless as they seem." The words lingered in the air long after he left, wrapping themselves around her thoughts like a coil. For the first time since the marriage began, Princess Xyrella of Eltar felt something she had never felt toward a human: unease. The palace atop the starlight throne had been designed to awe, kilometers of corridors, carved from photonic crystal, vaulted halls that resonated with harmonic energy, gardens suspended within stasis fields that blossomed without soil or sunlight. To most outsiders, it was a temple of impossible beauty. To Princess Xyrella, it was home. And lately, home had begun to feel strange. At first, she dismissed it as simple adjustment. Marrying Daniel Carter had altered nearly every facet of her existence. He was a diplomat by title, but his habits were domestic, humble even. He rose early, read reports from Earth with quiet focus, brewed his strange human beverages, and spent hours studying Eltaran history as if memorizing it for an exam. He was polite to the servants, respectful to the court, and always attentive to her needs. Too attentive, perhaps. To perfect. The unease she'd felt on the observation deck lingered, growing sharper with each passing day. Daniel would sometimes fall silent mid-conversation, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. Occasionally, she'd find him awake long past midnight, his eyes scanning invisible patterns across the stars. Once, when she approached him unexpectedly, he snapped a device shut, a small crystalline prism that dissolved into vapor the instant she tried to touch it. "Just a communication relay," he'd said with a disarming smile. "Diplomatic business." But he didn't say with whom. The first real crack in his facade appeared 3 weeks after their wedding. Xyrella had just finished a council session on the Dominion border conflicts when she returned to their private quarters. The lights were dimmed. Daniel's preference and soft Terran music hummed through the chamber's sonic fields. He was in his study, seated at his terminal, and he didn't hear her enter. Curiosity got the better of her. The display hovering before him wasn't an Eltaran system. It was something else, a neural cipher she'd never seen, its glyphs pulsing in rhythmic sequence. And then there was the voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. "Phase 2 will proceed ahead of schedule. Stand by for activation orders." Her breath caught. "Daniel," she said. He jumped. The display vanished instantly. "Xyrella, I didn't hear you." "What were you doing?" she asked, keeping her voice even. "Nothing important. Routine status updates from Earth." He smiled, too quickly. "We're coordinating resource shipments for the joint scientific stations." She wanted to believe him, but something in his posture, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers twitched before settling, told her he was lying. And if he was lying about this, what else was he hiding? Suspicion turned into action. Elturans valued truth above all things, but they also valued knowledge. And so, one night, when Daniel fell into deep sleep, humans, she had learned, needed far more rest than her kind. She called upon an old ally, Hymetic Keller. She whispered into the calm crystal, "I need a discreet scan performed. Level 9 discretion. No records." Keller's shimmering silhouette appeared before her. "On whom? Your radiance." "My husband." The medic's luminous eyes flickered, but he bowed. "As you command." The process was silent and swift. A filament of quantum sensors swept over Daniel's body while he slept, mapping his biology down to the atomic level. The data streamed into Zyrella's private channel, and what she saw froze her crystalline heart. It was impossible. Daniel Carter's genome matched baseline Homo sapiens, but only superficially. Beneath the surface lay layers of engineered complexity, dormant nanite clusters hidden in his bloodstream, sequences of code spliced with alien origins, not Elturan, but something older, more primal. His neural structure, too, bore traces of bioaugmentation, saptic densities far beyond known human limits, and an encrypted cortical lattice that refused to decode under any known algorithm. "Explain this," she demanded of Keller, her voice trembling. The medic's expression was grave. "I cannot. These are not natural, nor are they of any known scientific discipline within the Empire. Whoever, whatever, your consort is, he is no ordinary human." She dismissed Keller with a wave, but her mind was a storm. Who was he? Was Daniel even his real name? Was Earth aware of this? Or had they sent her something, someone, far more dangerous than they admitted? The next morning, she watched him closely over breakfast. Daniel hummed softly to himself as he read the daily dispatches, sipping tea and discussing trade routes as though nothing was amiss. The man across from her seemed gentle, thoughtful, even vulnerable. But now she knew there was something monstrous beneath the skin. "Tell me," she said suddenly, "what did you do before you became a diplomat?" He glanced up. "I worked with the Stellar Cooperation Initiative. We focused on building alliances, trade, research, cultural exchange. Before that." A faint hesitation. "Military intelligence." "Ah," she said quietly. "And did that involve enhancements?" He blinked. "Enhancements? Upgrades? Modifications?" Her gaze locked onto his. "Changes." Daniel set his cup down slowly. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity," she said, the same word she'd used when she first met him. But her tone was colder now, measured and probing. After all, humans are said to be primitive. And yet, here you are, a man who speaks 8 languages, understands Elturan harmonic theory better than some of my scholars, and solves starfield calculus in his head. He smiled faintly. "Are you accusing me of something? Should I be?" The silence stretched between them, taut as a drawn bowstring. And then, just as suddenly, he laughed. Not nervously, not defensively, but genuinely, warmly. "Zyrella," he said, "you're overthinking. I'm just a man who's trying to be worthy of the woman he married." It was a perfect answer. Maybe too perfect, and though part of her wanted to believe him, the memory of that encrypted cortex, of those dormant nanites humming quietly in his veins, refused to let her. That night, she stood once again at the observation deck, alone. The nebula drifted like a living tapestry beyond the glass, its violet storms lighting up the void. She thought of her ancestors, of the long wars against the Dominion, of the centuries of conquest and power. The Elturan Empire had always seen itself as the galaxy's pinnacle, its guardians and masters. And yet here she was, standing beside a man whose blood held secrets that dwarfed their science. Could Earth truly be as backward as they claimed? Or had humanity been hiding something all along, something deeper, darker, more deliberate? Zyrella pressed a hand against the glass, watching her reflection flicker against the stars. "Who are you, Daniel Carter?" she whispered. "And what are you preparing for?" Far below, in the quiet darkness of their quarters, Daniel stirred in his sleep. For a moment, his eyes opened, glowing faintly with a light she had never seen before, and then closed again, leaving no sign of what had passed. But the question hung heavy in the air, unanswered and ominous. At 3:17 Galactic Standard, The Starlight Throne's serenity shattered beneath a storm of plasma fire. Sirens screamed through the Citadel's halls. Hull shields flared white-hot under bombardment. The polished calm of Imperial life was obliterated in an instant. Princess Xyrella was in the diplomatic wing when the first blast hit. The floor pitched violently, sending her sprawling across the crystalline tiles. Her guards rushed to her side as the lights flickered, and emergency glyphs burned red across the walls. Status. She shouted over the wail of alarms. Enemy fleet highness. Captain Siren barked, pulling her to her feet. Dominion strike group. 20 dreadnoughts, maybe more. They bypassed the perimeter grid. Shields are holding for now, but another explosion rocked the Citadel, cutting him off. This one was closer. The throne ship is their target, Siren said grimly. They want the royal family, or the treaties. Xyrella's thoughts snapped instantly to Daniel. Where's my husband? In your chambers last we checked, the captain replied. Then that's where we're going, she said. Already sprinting down the corridor, the halls were chaos. Eltaran guards clashed with Dominion boarding parties. Insectoid warriors with chitin armor and plasma lances. While smoke and fire turned the once gleaming palace into a war zone, Xyrella moved like a blade, her crystalline skin hardening into armor as she projected a defensive resonance field. Every blast that struck her shattered harmlessly into refracted light. But fear gnawed at her with every step. Daniel was defenseless, human, a diplomat. If the Dominion captured or killed him, it would mean not only the end of the Alliance, but perhaps the spark of an interstellar war. She reached their quarters and burst through the sealed door, ready to protect him, ready to die for him if she must. What she saw froze her in place. The room was a ruin. Dominion soldiers lay scattered across the floor, their armor shattered, their weapons slagged into molten slag. The air hummed with an energy she had never felt, dense, layered, alive. And in the center of it all stood Daniel. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't wearing armor, but his entire body was wreathed in luminous geometric patterns, crawling like constellations beneath his skin. His eyes glowed with soft amber light, and around him, the environment itself seemed to obey. Shards of metal floated midair, rearranging into unfamiliar devices, while the very bulkheads of the chamber pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Daniel. Xyrella's voice trembled. What have you done? He turned toward her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his expression was utterly alien. Calm, focused, powerful, stay back, he said softly. It's not safe. What is this? How? The ship shook again. A blast ripped through the exterior plating, and a squad of Dominion shock troops stormed in, roaring their war cries. Daniel exhaled, just once, then he moved. It was not movement as Xyrella knew it. He didn't run or dodge. He simply was, here, then there, his body blurring through space in impossible ways. One soldier raised a plasma rifle, but it twisted in his grip, the weapon's components unraveling as if obeying an invisible command. Another lunged, only to freeze mid-leap, suspended in a web of light before being hurled backwards with bone-crushing force. It was over in seconds. The soldiers lay motionless. Daniel stood among them, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths, as though he'd simply taken a walk. By the core, Xyrella whispered, "You're not human." He met her gaze, and in that moment, she saw sadness flicker behind the power. "I am. I'm just not the kind of human you've been taught to expect." He led her out into the corridor, and the palace itself seemed to change as they walked. Hallways that had been torn apart began knitting themselves back together. Security drones that had been disabled suddenly reactivated, forming defensive perimeters. Entire decks shifted configuration, as if guided by an invisible hand. Everywhere they went, the Dominion advance faltered. Their communication relays jammed. Their weapons malfunctioned. Entire boarding squads vanished, sealed behind bulkheads that weren't supposed to move. And always, Daniel was at the center, quiet, composed, guiding the chaos with a wave of his hand or a glance. At last, they reached the command bridge. Admirals and tacticians stared in disbelief as he approached the central console, his glowing fingers dancing across controls far beyond any human interface. What are you doing?" Xyrella demanded. "Ending this. Your ships can't. I don't need ships." The starlight throne shuddered as something vast stirred beneath its surface. A deep, resonant pulse echoed through the hull, not a weapon, not a shield, but something older. Xyrella felt it in her bones, vibrating through the very atoms of the ship outside. The Dominion fleet faltered, their formation scattered. Their engines sputtered and died. Plasma cannons powered down mid-charge. Massive dreadnoughts drifted helplessly as invisible tendrils of code wrapped around their systems and bent them to a new will. Within minutes, the invaders were disarmed, immobilized, defeated, not by an army, but by one man. Silence fell across the bridge. The crew stared, awestruck, terrified. Reverend Daniel turned to face her, his glow fading, the storm of power subsiding into stillness. "It's done." Xyrella stepped forward, her crystalline features hard and unreadable. "Explain, now," he sighed, a sound of deep weariness. "You deserve the truth, all of it. Then speak." Daniel walked to the viewport, staring out at the crippled Dominion fleet. "Humanity isn't what you think it is. Not anymore. Not for a long time." "What do you mean?" "Our history, the one we teach in our schools, the one we let other species see, is only part of the story. Once, long before your empire rose, we were something else: explorers, architects, warriors. We stretched across the stars and built wonders that even your people would call impossible." She stared at him. "That's a myth." "No." He turned to her, eyes burning with quiet conviction. "It's memory. We fell hard. Civilizations rise and collapse, and we were no different. But before we vanished, we left behind safeguards, legacies, people, sleeper cells of knowledge hidden within our own biology, carriers who would awaken when the galaxy was ready, or when it needed us again. And you, I am one of them," he said simply. "One of the awakened." The weight of his words settled over the room like a gravity well. Xyrella felt dizzy, as though the floor beneath her had shifted. It explained everything: the impossible intellect, the hidden enhancements, the power he wielded like an extension of his will. And yet it raised more questions than it answered. "Why reveal yourself now?" She whispered. "Because the galaxy is changing," Daniel said. "The Dominion is only the beginning. Something older is stirring out there, something that once ended our first empire. And when it comes, neither Earth nor Elter will survive divided." He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto hers. "But together, we have a chance." Xyrella searched his face, the man she had thought was harmless, fragile, naive. Now she saw him for what he truly was, the embodiment of a power her people had never imagined. And to her own surprise, she was not afraid. She was curious again. And perhaps something more. Later, as the wreckage of the Dominion fleet drifted silently through the void, Xyrella stood beside Daniel on the observation deck. Stars burned cold and distant beyond the glass, their light falling gently across his features. "You changed everything today," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "I revealed what was always there. Will there be more like you?" He smiled faintly. "There already are." And for the first time since the day she met him, Xyrella realized that the man she had once dismissed as harmless might very well be the most dangerous being in the galaxy, and perhaps its only hope. The starlight throne drifted silently above the red-gold clouds of Dither Prime, its battered hull repaired but forever scarred by the Dominion assault. The galaxy had felt the tremor of that battle, not because of the fleet that fell, but because of the man who stopped it. Within hours, word had spread through every communication relay, every diplomatic channel, every hidden intelligence network. The story grew with each retelling. A single human, bonded to the Princess of Elter, had turned back a Dominion fleet without firing a shot. A single human had disabled dreadnoughts with a thought. A single human had rewritten the laws of war. And now the galaxy wanted answers. The Imperial Conclave, a gathering that happened only once every century, had been called. Representatives from more than 100 starfaring civilizations arrived in orbit around Dither Prime, their ships forming a glittering sphere around the throne. The great and the terrible had come, the insectoid monarchs of the Dominion, their pride bruised but not broken, the crystalline dynasties of the Elteran noble houses, some furious, others terrified, the reptilian hierarchs of the Kyrax Union, sniffing for weakness, and even envoys from the mysterious Archon Collective, who rarely emerged from their hidden worlds, and in the center of it all, Princess Xyrella and Daniel Carter stood side by side, the most watched couple in the galaxy. "Are you ready?" Xyrella asked as they waited in the great antechamber before the summit. Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "I'm not sure anyone could be ready for this. You could still walk away," she said quietly. "If you reveal the truth, you can't ever hide again. Every power in the galaxy will either want to control you or destroy you. Then they're welcome to try," he replied. "But I won't hide. Not anymore." She studied him for a long moment, the man she had once pitied, now the axis upon which empires would turn. And despite everything, she reached out and took his hand. "Then we do this together," she said. "Together," he echoed. The conclave chamber was colossal, a spherical hall suspended in zero gravity, where delegates floated among suspended platforms, their voices amplified by resonance fields. The noise was overwhelming. Shouts, accusations, pleas, demands. Daniel's very presence was enough to plunge centuries-old alliances into panic. At the center days, the supreme speaker of the conclave, a being of living plasma known as Eshka, raised a tendril of light. "Silence," they commanded. "We are convened to address a singular event, the use of unprecedented power. By the human known as Daniel Carter, Princess Xyrella of Elter, do you speak for him?" "I do," Xyrella said, her voice ringing across the chamber. "And he will speak for himself." Daniel stepped forward, 1,000 eyes, organic, mechanical, and otherwise, fixed on him. He did not flinch. "I know many of you are afraid," he began. "I would be too. You've just seen a single individual halt an invasion fleet without ships, without armies, without weapons. That kind of power can change everything." A ripple of uneasy murmurs swept through the chamber. "But I'm not here to threaten you," he continued. "I'm here to tell you the truth." And so he did. He spoke of humanity's forgotten age, of their rise and fall, of the vast empire they had once built, of the decision to scatter their legacy across the stars and slumber until the galaxy was ready for them again. He told them of the awakened, individuals like himself who were seeded across generations, dormant until a crisis demanded their return. Some delegates scoffed, others trembled. The Dominion envoy hissed and accused him of fabrication, but the evidence, the crippled fleet, the data streams, the recordings was undeniable. "This isn't just about humanity," Daniel said. "It's about all of us. The threats that ended our first empire still exist. Something older, something far beyond anything you've faced, is stirring in the void. If we remain divided, if we cling to petty rivalries, we will fall, just as we did before." The hall was silent now. "I am not a conqueror," he said. "I'm not here to build a new empire. I'm here to build a future where Elter, Earth, the Dominion, everyone, stands together against what's coming." The silence held for a heartbeat, then fractured into chaos. "He seeks dominion under a false banner of unity," hissed the Dominion regent. "He's a weapon, a human weapon," shouted a Kyrax general. "The old empire must never rise again," cried another delegate. The conclave dissolved into shouting matches, accusations, threats. Fleets began to reposition in orbit. Every faction's paranoia and ambition boiled to the surface. Xyrella leaned close. "It's not working. It will," Daniel murmured. "They just need time to be afraid. And if fear turns to war, then we show them something stronger." Hours later, the galaxy teetered on the brink. Several factions had already withdrawn from the conclave. The Dominion prepared to mobilize its reserves. Elteran intelligence reported that at least 3 rival empires were considering a preemptive strike, not against Elter, but against Earth. Daniel stood once more before the throne's viewport, watching the chaos unfold. "They'll never trust us," Xyrella said softly. "Not after this. They don't have to," he replied. "Not yet. Then what do we do?" Daniel turned to her, and there was something different in his eyes. Not the cold calculation of a weapon, but the weight of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall, and still believed in something better. "We build something they can't ignore," he said. "A coalition, not ruled by humans or Elterans or anyone, but led by those who understand what's at stake. You, me, others like us, and they'll follow." They will when they realize they don't have a choice. The months that followed reshaped history. The Stellar Accord was born, an unprecedented alliance between Earth and Elter, with dozens of smaller powers joining under their banner. It was not an empire, nor was it a military bloc. It was a pact, mutual defense, shared technology, and coordinated response to the looming unknown. Resistance was fierce. Assassination attempts, sabotage, propaganda campaigns all failed. With every challenge, the Accord grew stronger, and at its heart were two figures: the crystalline princess who once saw humans as primitive, and the human who had once hidden his godlike power beneath a diplomat's smile. One night, as their ship drifted through the glow of a newborn nebula, Xyrella found Daniel on the observation deck, the same place where she had once dismissed him as harmless. "You've changed the galaxy," she said. Stepping beside him, "We changed it," he corrected. Together, "Do you ever miss what we were before all this?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I remember, the universe doesn't care about comfort. It cares about survival, about evolution. And what about us?" she asked, turning to face him. "What are we now?" Daniel's gaze softened. "We're the bridge between what was and what's coming." She reached for his hand. "And what is coming?" He looked out into the endless dark, and for a heartbeat, his eyes glowed again with that ancient, unknowable light. "Something older than empires," he said quietly. "Something that remembers us." The silence stretched between them, heavy with destiny. Princess Xyrella had once thought her human husband was harmless, a fragile man from a primitive world, a political pawn in a game older than either of them. Now she knew better. He was not just a man, not just a husband. He was a spark, and the stars themselves would bend or burn because of it. And as their fingers intertwined beneath the light of 1,000 suns, she understood a truth she could no longer deny. The age of empires was ending. The age of them was just beginning.